I would go on runs. My old primary question was, how do I protect myself for obvious reasons? I had a very abusive adopted father. And my new one became, how can I be a powerful world changer that enjoys every breath? And so, very simply, repeating that over and over and over again. How can I be a powerful world changer that enjoys every breath? And you know me now, I'm a powerful world changer that enjoys every breath. I'm always happy. Joy is my home now, right? Joy is my home. And so I may take, little lefts and rights and go to anger or go to sadness or whatever, but I always come back home to joy.
This is the Ruby Hour. We're breaking into the vault of today's most brilliant minds to extract raw, actionable insights. This show is produced by Ruby Riot Creatives, the Austin, Texas video content marketing mavericks who help B2B and B2C businesses dominate through unparalleled strategic creativity. Chief Cat Herder Shelby Ring is your host. Claws out. Get ready to shred. Welcome to the rebellion.
Jason, you're here. You have made it on the show. I have been tracking you down for so long, and I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so glad to be here. Last time we were together, obviously, was our wedding, which you did a fantastic job with, and I'm so excited. I've been watching some of your shows. You're doing such a great job, and I'm very, very proud of you.
Thank you. Well, I am stoked to have you as a guest because they're filming you and your beautiful wife's wedding. All I could think of was like, holy hell, these guys are a power couple. Jason, how in the world did you find yourself in a position of helping other businesses scale exponentially?
It's a great question. And, it takes me back. Like, I think, again, I'll tell my story, but again, it's for your listeners, right? It's for all of us who really want to do something, and especially this weird group of people called business owners, right? We're rebels. Like, this is what I know, and this is what my family, as you witnessed at the wedding, all business owners, because we are unique people. There's 330 million people in the United States, 33 million business owners. So it's about 10%, which means we are a unique group of human beings. we hire 60% of the people that work in this country. We do 60% of a GDP of $27 trillion, right? And we're really, really crucial to the way that the world works, and helping reduce people that are poor, all poverty, that kind of stuff. It's just a great group of people. All the way back to the beginning, we were merchants, and merchants throughout history have changed the world. For me, it was a bit of rebellion. And I like to, if I'm being honest, which I will be with you, when I started this journey because of a little bit of pettiness. When I was a kid, we were broke. I mean, broke. We would have to, put a little bit of water in the bottom of the tub and then, share it between everybody in the family, and like broke. My mom walking down the street to pluck, stuff for us to eat, kind of broke. And I watched all the rich kids, and I got made fun of because of my clothes and wearing the same pair of pants, for months at a time. And so as I came out of that, my family, my adopted father was a bad guy. Like, my mom married this guy. He became very abusive. I started stepping in front of him when I was about 9 years old. My nose, although it looks perfect now, has been on all sides of my face, getting beat. And he went to prison when I was 17 for attempted murder of me and my mom. And so just like everybody watching your show, we all have a starting point. And that starting point doesn't define who we are today, but it says, okay, if we're still in that, I would have learned those things, which meant I would have been an abusive person. Most of my, including members of my own family, went on to be criminals. I started as a criminal. I collected money. I delivered drugs since I was 12 years old. Went in and out of jail. My my little brother's been in and out of jail most of his adult life. But it was a representation of what I think your show represents, which is mentorship. You know, you're doing this show not for a dollar reward. You're doing it as a service, and somebody will come across your show and hear things from people that they might not have heard in their family upbringing. Right? It breaks patterns. And for me, it was people reaching into my life going, well, if you're this good at collecting money and you're this good at fighting and you're this good at what you do, what if you applied that to something that lifted yourself out of the situation? And it just was hearing those kind of things. And it took the birth of my first son. And I did my last drug deal. I got stabbed in the chest. I've got a scar all the way across my chest. And as the knife went in, I didn't know if I was going to live or die, but the knife went in. And when I would get beat up really bad and get stuck in my bedroom while I healed when I was a kid, my grandma always made sure I had a Bible. I wasn't religious until, probably 3 or 4 years ago, actually. But there was a Bible verse that popped into my head right as the knife went in my chest. And it was, sins of the father born unto the children. And it was in that moment where a series of small things that I heard came together and said, oh, I'm not doing this to my son. I'm not doing this to my kids. I'm going to figure out a different way. Right. And that's what a lot of people do. They're like, I had a job. I did this. I did that. But I'm not going to do that anymore. There's a different way. Mm-hmm. And having that rebellious spirit anyway, what I looked into was this amazing thing called small business, right? Small and mid-sized companies. Like I said, 33 million of us in the United States doing 60% of the GDP. That's bigger than, most of the big companies combined. And it gave me an opportunity. And the opportunity wasn't a guarantee of success. It was a guarantee in the United States of America, the opportunity to be successful. And in order to do that, I had to align my behaviors with those that are in alignment with success. I had to fall in love with somebody else's outcome above my own. I had to find a need, fill a need, right? Which comes out of the movie Robots, by the way. Find a need, fill it, right? Mr. Big Weld. And find a need, fill a need, where I found some people that were like, okay, I need this service. And then I filled it better than anybody else. I had to learn how to change my language. I had to be in it for other people. Then I started hiring people, right? They become more important than you. Sometimes you pay them before you pay yourself. Sometimes you go unpaid for a while. And it really drilled in the alignment between being a great business owner has to align with you becoming a great human being first. And so that was a really great, it was like growing up all over again. I didn't grow up with a great father figure. I didn't grow up with a great environment to teach me how to be a good person. I didn't grow up with any of that. I learned exactly the opposite. So small business and the small and mid-sized companies, that's a story for a lot of us. A lot of us came out of trauma. A lot of us came out of situations that were less than ideal. And that was my start. I failed miserably in my first 3 companies, miserably, bankrupt, like dominoes. And, but I learned a lot. And as I was going through those failures, I'll take a breath here and let you ask a question. But, the beginning of this is important because, again, success isn't guaranteed, but the opportunity to become successful is. And so each one of those failures, I learned something. I took copious notes. I'm a big note taker. I'm here, I've got my pen. I'm always ready to take notes. And when I crashed my 3rd business, it broke my identity. And now I became worthless. I went through a divorce. Wasn't waking up in the same house as my kids anymore. My identity as somebody that was worthy of people's respect was gone. And that drove me into a deep depression, $2 million in debt, divorce, and it just spiraled down. it spiraled down and I lost everything to the point where I was living on the street in Southern California, begging for food. And it was that turnaround, right? There was an opportunity one day. I was like trying to still struggle with the idea that I'm a homeless guy. I've been homeless for 3 months at that point, hadn't eaten in 3 days. And now I'm like, I'm going to go into this homeless shelter to get some food. And Pastor Ricky that was in there that day, he gave me 2 books. He gave me the Bible, which I threw back at him because I was mad at God at the time. and he gave me Tony Robbins' book, Awaken the Giant Within. And I read that book, ended up going to work for Tony as a speaker, had those 3 notebooks, met with some of the greatest business minds on the face of the planet and said, what would you have done? Like I begged him. I said, let me take you out. I'll come and take your trash out. I'll come cook you breakfast. I'll do whatever, but give me 15 minutes of what you would have done. Left that, those 4 years with Tony with 3 new notebooks of how to do things differently. And got into the turnaround world where I was fixing the most broken businesses on the planet, started buying my own companies and built a nice, grouping of businesses. I had 32 at the height, and ended up selling all of them, 26 of them in 2019 for a really, really nice exit. So what I tell people is there is a right way. It doesn't matter. You're playing a game that can free you to your own exit, right? We talk about end game in my community a lot, that business is about the one. This conversation that we're having together might be seen by hundreds of thousands of people, but it's for the one that's saying, okay, I need to reverse back. No matter what I'm doing right now, I need to take my life back and say, what do I want my end game to look like? Why am I playing this game called business? What is the outcome of that? And so that was the biggest lesson for me. I was just playing it, who had the biggest house, and who had the fastest cars, and, I was trying to buy people's love instead of, instead of utilizing it to buy my own freedom. Mm-hmm. So that's the story, so to speak.
Oh, gosh. I mean, like, what a spectrum of life experience. And I feel like there's a certain type of energy. I had a conversation on a friend's infertility podcast a few months ago of we'd never met in real life, but upon crossing paths, sharing stories, there was a certain grit that comes from certain experiences of hardship and loss and grief and still picking yourself back up. And I find there's such a parallel, I think, for a lot of business owners, a lot of entrepreneurs, because there's something that you wanted more than the pain of your reality, the ability to go beyond that. So what were some of the things in those moments of dropping habits and in the recognizing I need to embody a different experience? Tell me more about that. How did you start to embody a confidence of this is the life I wanted to live?
It's, again, I think for everybody, it's little pieces that are kind of put together. And the shortcut for everybody watching, the shortcut is to go and design your own end game, right? What is the house you want to live in? What kind of money do you want to be making? What kind of traveling do you want to be doing? Where, those kind of things. That's the shortcut, because otherwise you're building maybe what your parents wanted for you. Maybe you're building what your friends around you are building. It's unconscious. So the shortcut is to get super conscious about what is on your heart and in your mind for your ideal end game. And by the way, your first end game, when you reach it, is just the beginning of your next end game, right? And because it starts to stack on itself. Cool. But what you're talking about is really, really powerful. One of the people that I worked with I did a bunch of work with neuroscientists, like lined up in a row. Weirdly, it was just a weird area, a weird time in my life. And so every time, because I'm a nut about my health, I would say, well, whatever you're doing, I'll help you with your business, but I want to know more about my brain. And so we would do scans, and one of them that I went
Ooh.
to, we would do scans and learn about this thing called our brain. And one of the early things that I realized was that our experience is based in a triad, right? This is from a couple of different philosophers and scientists and things out there, but it's a triad of language, physiology, and focus. Okay, so language, what words do you use a lot out loud, which means you're using them a lot internally. Physiology, how do you hold yourself? Do you hold yourself defeated, or do you hold yourself proud? Right. And focus is, what are you focused on? Are you focused on a future that you're building, or are you focused on the pain of now and a lot of lies about being a Democrat, Republican, black, white, gay, straight, all those things that are meant to kind of separate us? What are you focused on? And I added a few things to them when I learned that process called intensity and repetition. And so I would go on runs. My old primary question was, how do I protect myself, for obvious reasons? I had a very abusive adopted father. And my new one became, how can I be a powerful world changer that enjoys every breath? And so very simply, repeating that over and over and over again, I would go on runs and I would beat my chest. How can I be a powerful world changer that enjoys every breath? And you know me now, I'm a powerful world changer that enjoys every breath. I'm always happy. Joy is my home now, right? Joy is my home. And so I may take, little lefts and rights and go to anger or go to sadness or whatever, but I always come back home to joy. And so I went to this one, my very first neuroscientist, and we did scans of my brain. And he said, I would have said that you would be in prison. I would say, because of the damage from all of the beatings and all this kind of stuff. But he said, looking closer, and then I had a conversation with him. He says, I've been doing this for 30 years. And for 30 years, I've been able to pretty much look at somebody's scan, not know anything about them, and be able to predict who is going to step in the room and have a conversation with me. Right. And so he said, I thought I was going to see an ex-prisoner, somebody that, was addicted to drugs, somebody. And he goes, you're far beyond that. He goes, let's look at him again. What had happened physically in my own brain was I wired around the damage because of the repetition and intensity of a clear destination. I didn't know what it meant to be a powerful world changer. I was like, I like that statement, right? I didn't know what it meant to enjoy every breath, because I certainly didn't. I was depressed. I went through all this stuff. I contemplated suicide, all this stuff, but I wired around it because the brain has this amazing ability. You see it in stroke victims, where they can wire around their arm. They get their full use of their arms again. You can wire around it, but we've been told the lie that we are who we are, and that's who we're going to be until we die. Right. And it's traumatic experiences where you're like, I would rather be dead than experience this. So I'm going to try everything I can to have a better experience in life. And it's at that breaking point where we do it naturally. We don't need fancy neurosciences. We don't need, gurus. We don't need all those other kind of stuff. We just need to decide, I can paint literally with my own mind. I can paint a new future for myself with the words that I speak to myself, with the intensity that I speak them to myself. Because most people that are in depression, which I was, are constantly thinking depressive thoughts, right? They're constantly thinking depressive thoughts, and people that are angry are thinking angry thoughts. Successful people, whatever that means to the unique 8 billion people that walk this earth, think successful things. They're thinking about how they can serve other people. They're thinking about how they can improve their vocabulary. How can I improve my skill set? How can I connect to more people? How can I make more of this thing that they call money? What will I do with that money? We're constantly thinking in a different realm, and that starts to create its own reality. Sorry, I got to change the camera here really quick. So, so the second neuroscientist that I went to visit with, she said that there's a gene, and you nailed it right on the head. There's a gene that she can't, at some point she says she wants to prove it. She was 93 years old, sharper than most 25-year-olds that I met, but there's a perseverance gene, right? There's this perseverance gene, and some people have it and some people need to develop it. I think everybody has the ability to build it out, but it's under pressure. And there's two kinds of pressure, and this is where I'll end. Self-imposed pressure or external pressure. The external pressure you have no control over. You know, if life comes at you with a death in the family, with a sickness, with a bankruptcy, with money problems, with friend problems, with whatever, then you have to react to it with whatever tools you have in your tool belt, whatever you're thinking, whatever your triad is, your physiology, focus, and language, right? Whatever you're dealing with. Self-imposed means I'm going to put the pressure on myself now so that I will be able to better bridge those challenges that will come. They will come. Whether they're challenges of progress or challenges of regret, we're going to deal with them. And so the better you train yourself for that, you know, my wife and I do undercover rescues of kids in the sex trade, right? We prepare for those things. We know what kind of building we're going into. We know what kind of firearms they might have. We know the child that we're going after. We know how many of the bad guys there are. We know the more we prepare for that mission, the higher likelihood that everybody's going to come home and we're going to bring that child with us. It's no different for us in our life, but we have been sold, and we are being sold today on this lie that it's something outside of us that is creating our sadness or our lack of opportunity. It's not. Whoever's president of the United States, I could care less. I've made money under all of them, right? I've been happy under all of them, right? I'm got married under one of them, and we're still married under another one. They're, you know what I mean? The external world starts to mirror your internal. So if you find yourself depressed, you're probably around depressed people. You find yourself broke, you're probably around broke people. You find yourself in bad relationships, you're probably around bad relationships. That's why my wedding, right, was curated. I had very little family, blood family there, and a lot of family of choice, a lot of them. And you could tell, like, all the way down to people that were serving our food, everybody was loved because I was surrounded by love, because I am love. Right. And yes, there was, $1 billion worth of wealth created from the people that I had served with consulting and doing all that kind of stuff. Yes, there was wealth, but it was love. Nobody cared about who had what money in our crowd. Nobody. And so, this whole idea of perseverance starts with you, the individual listening to this show, designing what would be the best that I could possibly imagine experience for myself. And then you start beelining it for that with your physiology, focus, language, emotion, multiplied by intensity and repetition.
That sounds like a pretty good recipe to me.
Oh
my gosh.
It's a great formula.
Oh. So when I think of you in the world, I can't help but also link it to observing how you are around your wife and the tenderness. I mean, you and your buddies, there was plenty of grunts and yells and very much warrior energy, but then you orient yourself to your queen, and that king presence was over the top apparent. How did you learn how to wield your masculinity, the warrior energy, but also be able to facilitate for the softer individuals in your life?
I would say, again, masculinity, this is a great topic for us to talk about, because masculine energy, feminine energy is such a beautiful dance. and very, very manipulated and bastardized, I think, in the movies we watch. And because people think about masculinity, they obviously come up with the term toxic masculinity, and which is a word that, when somebody is displaying toxic masculinity, they're not displaying masculinity at all, to be honest with you, right? Masculine energy, which I've learned from my mentors, because like I said, I had a really bad example of being a father and being a husband, really bad example in my childhood. And it was great to say, to have that experience. And in my mind, while I was healing, while I was reading books, while I was I'm not going to grow up to be anything like this man. So that's where it started. And then it progressed into having really great men around me. And what I mean by really great men is men that displayed the things that I wanted, so that I could mirror their behaviors, right? Really good fathers, really good husbands, really good business community leaders, really great service oriented in the church and in politics and in charity and, those kind of things. And I have the greatest mentors ever, because I begged them to be in their life, right? I begged them. And so masculinity, to me, is having a presence that you can do violence, but you choose not to. And for my wife, I would burn the earth down for her, burn it to the nubs. And when I'm with her, for her to feel safe and secure, she needs to feel protected and comfortable, right? And so there's such a deep love for her that I know what energy is needed. Sometimes she needs me to be more assertive. Sometimes she needs me just to listen. Sometimes, but it comes down to one word, Shelby, which is presence, right? That's the thing that I do my best. I'm present with you. I'm not thinking about my next meeting. I'm not thinking about what happened, or I'm thinking about our conversation. And when I'm with my wife, I'm 100% present with her. And she had to learn along with it, right? Being a masculine man means that you are leading your wife, right? She teaches me a lot of stuff too. It's not to say that I'm her boss, but you're leading them, you're leading your wife in certain areas. And so her home had to change, just like my home had to change, teaching her that, hey, there's this home that you have gotten used to. Maybe you could choose another one. And she did, right? And has completely blossomed into this unbelievable powerhouse of a woman, because I was present. And like, I don't know, what's a term that I would use? Like like a moat, right? To protect her, like walls around her, for her to develop whatever it is that she wants to do with her own life. And, and she melts me. Like, you've seen it. Like I could be raging at the world and have her, put her hand on my head or on my shoulder, and I'm just like gone. Like it's, I'm there. So I don't, again, all I can do is explain for me that I think that masculinity is based in presence. It's based in the ability, not, again, I keep myself physically fit. I know how to use weapons. I train incessantly. It's being able to be violent if somebody needed me to be, right? In service of the vulnerable. And when my wife is in her most feminine, she is her most vulnerable, which means I have to be on guard at all times in defense of my wife if she's going to be in her feminine, which is where her natural state is. There's masculine women and there's feminine men, and I understand that. It's not a judgment thing. Her natural state is feminine. So my natural state, to be the polar opposite of that, is to be in my masculine. And that's to be always on guard to make sure that my wife is safe.
Oh, I love it so much. And it's such a cool, I have a lot of these conversations because I'm a millennial, but seeing the upcoming generations of young men, there's a huge detach of intellectualizing. Oh, I'm in my king energy. I'm a king. I'm a king. I'm a king. It's like, just because you say it a certain amount of times does not mean you hold court.
Yeah.
And just connecting the dots of what does it look like in today's day and age, where when people say masculinity, probably most people pair it with toxic. So it's reclaiming, what does it mean for building sustainable partnerships now, building relationships, building marriages that last for decades and decades. I mean, from filming weddings for over a decade,
Mm,
you see trends, and you see when couples have a real there's a ride or die energy, or there's not. And
right.
so, in your perspective, what are the things for the young men that are coming of age these days? What can they do to become that man that attracts the bombshell broad that is, that wants to be there by his side and to support his world as she's building hers?
Great question. I really do feel for my generation of men and below, and younger. I mean, not below, but younger, because society has done its best to beat masculinity out of us. Um, and to resist that takes great intellect, and a great commitment to resist a societal shift that bastardizes nature in and of itself. You know, there's a lot of bad examples. I can't remember the guy's name right now. It'll pop into my head here in a second. Dan Bilzerian. Okay. Dan Bilzerian is a guy who, horrible example of masculinity. Big boat, flashing his money everywhere, women everywhere in bikinis. And I have a lot of respect for him because he made a shift recently on a podcast. He said, none of that stuff made me happy. Right. It was embarrassing. It was this, it was that. I have a lot of respect for people because I believe it's part of your journey. To use your language, to get to a king, you've got to go, got to be a jester. You've got to be a prince. You've got to be, there's a journey to go through those things, but making sure you go through them and don't stay in them. Stating that you're a king, there's two sides of that coin. One is, what is a king? When you say that word, what is a king? There are bad kings and there are good kings, right? There are kings that were positional to say, of a bloodline, right? Just happen to be born, with certain male parts, right? That doesn't make you a king. That's positional. Earned means that you are in service to an idea or a group of people larger than yourself. And so for the younger men that may watch this show, I feel for you in the environment that you're in, but it also gives you a greater opportunity to learn what masculinity and being a king and being a leader actually means. Historically, you can read about great kings. You can read about great leaders. You can read about great men and model their behavior outside of what is glorified, right? Your body count says nothing about you as a man, nothing. The amount of money that you have says nothing about you as a man. Who you serve and who calls you friend, and who can trust you makes you a man. When we go on these undercover things, most of the time my wife stays out of, gun range, let's say, right? Because they have what they're doing for the team and keeping us safe in Overwatch and that kind of stuff. And then there's us that go out with the bulletproof vests and we kick down doors. We don't know what we're going to see. I have to trust the man on my right. I have to trust the man on my left, that my life is in their hands. Their lives are in my hands, and I have to trust them. And so if a young man is watching this, being trustworthy are skill sets that are worth embodying, seeking out, modeling in the people that exist around you, right? Again, yes, it's a tough environment, but that doesn't give you an excuse to behave. I say this a lot. If you're behaving like the greater portion of humanity, you're doing something wrong, right? It does put you other than, it puts you aside, it puts you in a narrower group of people. I'm not invited to a lot of the business guru stuff because what they're talking about is absolute bullshit. They're teaching bad techniques. They're in it for the money. They're in it for the glory. They're in it for the likes and the follows and all this other kind of stuff. Holding true to an identity of ethics reduces the amount of people that will be in your life. But those people, one is worth a million. One close person is worth a million followers, right? And you don't learn that until you start to understand. My friends that like I said, you met a lot of them at the wedding. You were in the safest place in America with that group of men.
It felt that way. Yeah.
You were in the safest place in America. And one of my friends said, no, that they could invade this country and this would be the wrong wedding to show up at. But,
just a bunch of savages.
Yeah.
So good.
Just a bunch of savages, but laughing and loving and, and great energy and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't like we were standing around with our arms crossed, flexing our biceps.
Yeah.
We were having a great time. Right. But if something would have popped off, we were ready, So I would say, again, for the younger generation, find men that are worthy of your attention. And it's not the ones that are flashing their monies and their jets and their cars and, and their body count and all those are not the men worthy of your respect. And they're not worthy of you modeling them as kings because they're not. They're jesters in a temporary state of what looks like success. Most of these people end up with nothing. Most of them, they lose everything because I lost it my first time around because I thought I was buying everybody's love with my big house and my boats and my blah, blah, blah. The first time I lost everything. And guess what? None of them were around. Everybody saw the success. They were around me for my parties. They were around me for my money. Second time when I came back, I was like, none of that matters. Human beings of value and me becoming a human being of value is what matters. Emily and I were just at a funeral. And it's always a really great experience to go to those because no matter what that man was, and he was a good man in Emily's family, he was a good man. He took with him what fit in that box, right? None of the other stuff goes. And what was left was the experiences of his children, of his wife, of his nephews, his nieces, his friends. Those were the things that were left. And so those are the things that I think that we should hyper focus on developing. The rest of it comes along. You'll always make enough money to do things. And, building wealth is a way of building freedom and choice. But it's got to be built in service of other people and not in service of yourself. That's the only time it sticks.
Oh, gosh, those are so good. Just,
Some great questions, by the way.
Thank you. It's so critical. I mean, I've been on this soapbox for a few years now because as someone that, I finished out my 20s, going into my 30s with an awareness of, I was married at 19 and divorced by 22. And to come through a certain context of life, I took marriage and partnership extremely seriously because I do believe in finding somebody that is worth being by your side through the thick and thin. And I think that in today's day and age where we are so estranged from, you might like I'll speak in I statements. I found myself as someone that was wanting to be my best and embody my best. I didn't recognize when I had behaviors that were actually they were off-putting with great partners, and I didn't recognize what is creating this, this thing that's pulling us apart.
Yeah.
And that's when I started to understand, what are these attributes, and a vocabulary of, when you're receptive to something versus when you're in a giving energy, and vice versa. What advice do you have for the Gen Zs, the millennial women these days that are, they're looking for their king, oh, I want to be with a king, blah, blah, blah. What are the attributes that woman needs to embody to catch the attention of a man that holds his own space?
Yeah. Great question. The best example, you just interviewed her, my wife, who's of that generation. And the standards that she held for herself long before me, because, if I met her younger, those kind of things, I probably wasn't ready for a woman of her quality. I had to become the man that deserved her, number one. And she was taught that she needed to be a woman worthy of a man of, what I've become, for instance, not to pat myself on the back, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's a great mix. And so for the, far be it, I don't think I've ever given millennial women advice about anything about being a woman because that's not really my best. I'm not the best one to do that. But what I will say is that my wife is a fantastic example of a beautiful woman who could be, and could have been with any man that she wanted because of the standards that she's held herself to. She educated herself, not only in law, not only in being top of her class in college, not only in your traditional education area, but she also educated herself in how to be a good human. She's very deep in the Bible, walks very, very solidly with Jesus, and has those standards. Did she party? Yeah, she partied, but she always knew that there was a line. A woman that gives herself away freely is viewed that way from the men that would take advantage of them freely. Right. Women that hold themselves to a higher standard, they tend to find men that hold themselves to a higher standard. Her and I met at a Tony Robbins event, right? That was an environment where people, it was a stadium full of 10,000 people that were there. I got invited there because we took Tony Robbins undercover with us on a child rescue. So he had us there in the environment. I went through Tony. I love Tony Robbins. I worked for him, and then, have a lot of my success to thank him for. She was there because she wanted to take her life to another level. And so that environment really lent itself to having two people who had worked on themselves a lot to be able to come across each other's path. And in a sea of 10,000 people, I found my soulmate. So, the best advice I could give millennial women, I do have daughters, in that area. And really all I tell them is to model women that they respect and find women that are in the relationship that you want to have and be around them. Spend less time around women that are building up their own body count, right? Or around men who are building up their body count and may just see you as such. And really just again, like the Bible is it's a great thing. This isn't a call for people to become Christians, but I can tell you that the Bible is a great guidebook for people to model their behaviors after. A lot of good wisdom in there.
Mm. Okay, so
Wait,
basically what I'm hearing,
one last thing,
yes.
because this is what our child rescue, it's around, a lot, the greater portion are little girls that we're rescuing. It's to know your worth, right? You're worth so much, you're worth so much. We had this experience, and it's very hard for me not to tear up because of the experience that I had with it. But we went looking for this little 14-year-old, maybe I think she was 12 actually, this little 12-year-old girl. And it was during the BLM riots and stuff like that. And our entire team is a bunch of white dudes that look like cops, and we were in a really poor neighborhood, and we went in to do this rescue, and we found this girl almost by a miracle. And it was late at night, very cold, and there was about 13, 14 of us that found this little girl, and we surrounded the car she was in with the man who was selling her, and stood there waiting for the cops to come. And one of our biggest guys, Big Mike, was standing right by the window, and we stood there for about 2.5 hours freezing outside. And finally she rolled down the window and she said, "I can't believe all of this is for me." And Big Mike, I was standing right behind him. Big Mike just said straight to her, he said, "Oh, baby girl, you've had 32 of us looking for you for over a year. We love you." She broke down crying. Like, it's hard for me not to cry just thinking about it. And then she got out of the car and went back with, Emily and the other women that were in the car to be able to transport her. And she got in, and Pastor Rudy, who runs our organization, says to all the girls, he only says one thing, because we try to get him away from men, right? We put him with the women. And he gets in the car and he says one thing. He goes, I'm sorry for any man has treated you poorly in your life. And then he gets out, and then the women take over. But I think if every woman, every human really, but every woman, since we're on the subject, really knew her worth to God, to powers that are much higher than man, they really knew that their worth, they would treat themselves differently, right? They would make different decisions. And so know your worth is probably the 3 words that I'll end that with.
Ugh. Like, yeah, know your worth. Holy cow. That's so powerful. I'm just visualizing and reflecting on like the 32 people, it's been 32 people that have been looking for you for over a year. How did you get into that world of rescuing, just the human trafficking space?
Yeah, it's a great story. When I started making money my second time around, I knew that part of developing my own end game was that I wanted to be of service to the things that cause me pain. And one of them was, food shortage. So I started working with an organization called Feed a Billion, which I'm still the CEO of. And I started working heavily in domestic violence, fighting domestic violence, and putting, my mom was a victim of it. I watched it happen with my own eyes. I knew the scenarios. I knew what could have helped her out of it. I knew all that stuff. And so I started working in that realm with my excess cash, because I knew that was something that I cared about. And so I would go to fundraisers and I would do this, that, and the other. And so a friend of mine, he reached out to me and he said, "I know you do a lot of these fundraisers. We're doing a fundraiser for child trafficking." Didn't know what it was. I was raised around gang members and drug dealers and all this kind of stuff. Child trafficking wasn't a thing, for us to be around, because, for better or worse, the criminals that I hung around with when I was a kid were protectors of their little communities. Right. And kids were always held at a high standard. And so anyways, I said, okay, yeah, I don't know what that is, but I'll come. And I went and I watched this documentary about children that are sold for sex, and, babies, 10, 9, 9 months old. Like just, it absolutely destroyed me, Shelby. I was like, this is unbelievable. And I couldn't go home. I mean, I've got, 3 beautiful daughters, and I couldn't go home. I was like, I went to a park and I just started to cry. Like, I'm not a big crier. I know I just cried, but, but I'm not a big emotional person, but I was crying more hot tears of anger. Like, how
Yeah.
can this world, and I was already mad at God. Like, I hadn't become a Christian yet. And, I was like, how in the world can this kind of thing be happening? And so sun came up. I was parked in this park, and I clicked on and I did my very first like public thing that later on became a podcast and whatnot. But, and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do about this, but I'm going to do something. And somebody watched that Facebook Live and called me and said, hey, Jason, I know your background. I know you've got some skills. Do you want to go undercover with us? We're going to go get some kids and take down some bad guys. I was like, hell yes, let's go. Let's go.
Mm.
And so I did that. I joined that team. That team, there's been a movie made about what they do and who they are recently called Sound of Freedom. And that's where we took Tony Robbins undercover with us, and we recovered 36 little girls and put 11 traffickers away. And ever since then, that's been something that's been of high priority for me. I have the skill sets. I have the ability to be able to pay for, rescues. I have the skill sets to be able to put on a bulletproof vest. I have the skill sets to go undercover. I have all of those skill sets. And so that's become a passion, but that's where it started. And, that's, one of the plaques that's behind me was given to me, says the shield, right? That's part of my identity, is just shielding the less fortunate and the vulnerable. And so that's something that I hope to do until I can't operate anymore, is to help people.
What a beautiful metaphor with the shield. I mean, when I was interviewing your wife, we were literally using vocabulary of how the strength and the beauty of a man in his true masculine is the fortress that lets the feminine
Fortress.
soften.
That was the word I was looking for before. I said moat.
Yes,
Fortress,
moats.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. What a beautiful expression in your lifetime. Tell me about some of the biggest things that you've learned when it comes to negotiating and expressing your worth as a service provider. What are some of the things that are completely overlooked by most people, but actually create some of the biggest impact?
Great question. Now, this is an area, I mean, if I was, shield for everything we just talked about, but for small and mid-sized companies, I feel like I'm a shield now, which is the only reason I teach now. Very rare that you find people that teach about business that actually do business, have done business successfully, those kind of things. And, my mentor is a guy by the name of Keith Cunningham, who is the rich dad in the Rich Dad, Poor Dad books, right?
Oh, that's
real
too funny.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Real guy, real businesses. And you very rare that you find people that are good at what they do and they have the ability to teach, much less they do teach. Right. And so this area, I have to tell you why I'm so passionate about it first, because anybody that has a business right now, and we're designated worldwide called SMEs, right? Small and mid-sized enterprises. That's a designation. And it simply means you have anywhere from 0 employees to 499. 499, you're now a large entity or a large enterprise. And when I look back through history to the merchants of old, the people that made money, they helped their cities. We're innovators, really, is what we are at our core. And when I look at throughout history, I started to do some research, especially back in 2020 when we all got called non-essential. Remember that?
Gosh.
You had a bunch of idiots sitting in Washington, D.C. who couldn't run a business if they tried. I wouldn't hire any of them to run a lollipop stand for me, saying that we're non-essential. I found some criminality in that mindset, in that, they let the big companies, stay open, because they would make money off their stock. I was upset about it, right? I was like, this is terrible. And so I dug in back then. I was busy doing some other stuff, but I dug in and I'm like, this is not right. We're not non-essential. That's when I figured out we do 60% of the GDP, right? That group of people. We do 60% of the hiring. There is no America without us. There is no such thing as non-essential when it comes to us. And so I started digging into the history of it. And back in 1890, there was this bill passed for the first time in the world, right? The first time that a centralized government ever stood up for the consolidation. Like, you know, when you think of our Constitution, it's a document, it's an anti-consolidation document. Consolidation of what? Too much power into too few hands. Well, this bill that passed in 1890, there's this thing called the World Poverty Index. Okay. And forever, it's been 90% of the world lives in abject poverty. That's less than $1 a day for being able to feed your family. And it existed before that. And we say, oh, America is the thing that changed it. Well, 1776 to 1890, nothing really changed. And by the way, there was too much power consolidating into too few families' hands to where business was becoming like oligarchy in Russia and all these other places, right? Our centralized government stood up and passed a world-changing bill called the Sherman Act, which later became the FTC Act, which basically said that there's something called antitrust. Okay. Too few companies or people can't own too many businesses because that puts a thumb on innovation and freedom economically for people. Okay. And so that changed the world. They broke up multiple companies. They broke up multiple families. It's worse right now than it was back then because we have cowards as political leaders. But I want to let everybody know if they have a business, where they sit in historically, because what happened was you go to to the year 2000, abject poverty had flipped on its head. In the world, only 10% live in abject poverty. And that's the only thing that changed, was the ability for people like you and I to, I'm a nobody from nowhere that was able to pick up the mantle of being a merchant and be able to do something with my life. Okay. Most of us are, right? Most of us don't come from rich families, or else we would be riding on the coattails of the generation that actually created it. Right. But what that meant was that we changed the entire world. And so economic freedom has everything to do with our ability to live out our lives in freedom. So now let's get to where we are, the practical application of the question you asked, which is, what are some of the things that business owners miss? Number one, you miss that you are historically a badass. Historically, you are a rebel. Historically, you are an innovator. Historically, you are holding up an entire, the biggest country, the biggest GDP, the biggest economy in the history of mankind is on your shoulders. You are one of them. And so realizing that you're not disconnected in, like, I'm trying to make a sale and I'm trying to, get somebody to book me for for video. I'm not trying, just disconnecting you from that powerhouse family that you belong to is probably one of the biggest lies of control from people that don't do shit, right? They don't do anything. They sit back and they ride off of our tax dollars. They ride off of the decisions that we make. They enjoy the innovations that we put forth. And so knowing where you are historically is important. Number two is knowing that you are building a machine that creates cash. You're not building an identity. You're building a machine that creates cash. It's important for you to understand that, because when my businesses crashed, my business was me and my businesses, that was my identity. And when they failed, I was a failure. Okay. You're building a machine. Now machines can be duplicated. Okay. Your machine needs to be built to create your end game. Okay. So when you started your business, and I could break your whole situation down all the way back to when you started. You started for whatever reason. For the most part, it's like, I want to make more money. I want to have a little bit more freedom, right? And you get started and you're like, I'm making less money and I have less freedom, right? There's it's the exact opposite of
Yeah.
what you got into it for. But if you realized in the beginning, it's like, okay, cool. There's a process that I have to go through here for me to be able to build a machine that creates cash, that's going to create the freedom, because that's what everybody's after. If that's the way that they articulate it or not, that's what you're building a business for, is to create more choices, right? For you to be able to do more things, to be able to do the things, travel, start a charity, whatever it is that you want to do with your life. And so you start with that end game and you reverse engineer to where you are today. And then you look at your industry and you say, okay, who's doing it at a level that's going to get me my freedom, right? That's going to get me my end game. Who's doing that? And then modeling what they do, right? You model what they do. And a lot of people, yes, there's gurus. Yes. I mean, I have a course myself that's, that a lot of people take to learn how to do business, but a simple conversation with a business owner who's doing what you're doing, we love to teach. Business owners like to teach. They like to pass it on to somebody who is asking. They love to do it. They're not maybe as good as somebody that's trained to do it or whatever, but that conversation, hey, can I take you to lunch? Will you jump on a Zoom call with me and tell me, how did you get to the level that you're at with your business? I would love to model that. People share that so freely. I do a podcast every Saturday live. It's like a live radio show on Twitter, right? Where a bunch of business owners come in. I teach a little bit, but the conversations that happen amongst the business owners are so valuable, right? So you're not on an island, so ask people for help, right? But you can't ask them for help if you don't know what the outcome is. This trophy right here that's on my pen, I won that competing against some of the best business owners in the world, about 5,000 or 6,000 of them. And they were like, we're going to do this thing and we're going to all compete, blah, 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 blah. We put this team together and I said, okay, cool. I'll be the CEO of this team. It'll be a great condensed, it was a 7-day competition, condensed opportunity for me to do in a short amount of time what I do every day for businesses. So we put it together and I brought the team together and I said, what is it exactly? What's the first thing that we need to decide? And they were like, well, we got to get marketing down and we got to get, these people involved and we got to get a great logo and I guess, stop. No. What is the number one objective that we're going to start from? The outcome first. And they're like, well, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, you know the answer. I said, yes. The answer is that we're going to win this son of a buck. Okay. That version of everybody that owns a business that's watching this right now is, when did you in your life decide that you started your business to win? Right? What does winning look like for you? And that means, what kind of house do you want paid off? What kind of car do you want to be driving? What kind of cash do you need in the bank? What kind of retirement? If you just start from that perspective, you're ahead of the rest of the people you're competing against. The figure is 95% of business owners fail. 95% in a 10-year period of time. 50% of them don't see their first year in business. Okay? Because they're out of business. And so I don't want to do what they're doing. I want to do what people who are in the 5% do. Okay. That's what my program is all about. It's for the 5%. I build 5% companies and I build 5% business owners. That's what I do. And so if you say, okay, everybody can stop right now, whether you've been in business for 25 years, my consulting company, that's what my consulting company does, is we go in and actually fix these companies. Same premise. And you could we'll go into a 3rd generation business and we'll be like, what is the objective of your company? And they're like, well, we got to have great marketing. Oh, we got to have great operations. Oh, we got to have, no, it's to win. It's to win. What does that mean? Right now we get to define, and every definition comes with a dollar amount attached to it. Now you have dollars that are going to go towards your specific end game, instead of dollars going to try to impress people who don't like you and who you don't want to be around. On Instagram, you have no idea how many of the guys that are out there quoting, touting themselves as business, that I get phone calls from, hey, I can't make my Lambo payment. Can I borrow some money? right? Yeah, because they're full of shit, right? They're playing it to look in the moment like they're successful. Don't do that. You need to look again. You know, you've known us for a little while. I don't tout my wealth. It's the last thing I do because it's not important. And to the people it is important to, I don't want to be their friends. I don't want them in my life. Matter of fact, the more money you make, the more you want to look like you have none. Because the world is out to take money away from people who have it, right? So your entire strategy becomes, you know, we use the moat example, it becomes a moat around the shit that you do have. So if you're in business, you set what it is, your outcome, that'll come with a dollar amount. And then you start to build your business as a system, right? The company, the division that we just built out is called Built to Exit. Okay. Part of your when you're developing your end game is the best company you'll ever build is one that you're building to sell to the most sophisticated buyers of business. The most sophisticated buyers of business are called private equity firms. They're smart. They know to which businesses to buy, and they buy systems. They buy relationships to the customer. They buy management teams, and they buy a very, very in-depth, well thought out exit plan. That's what they buy. And so if you build your company around those 4 agendas, you may never sell. You may love your business, right? But our tagline at Built to Exit is everybody exits, how matters. Everybody's going to die someday, right? You're not going to take your business with you. So are you going to leave a mess for your family? Right? Are you going to, or are you going to pass it on to somebody in your family? Are you going to sell it to a private equity firm? Are you going to have to shut it down because it's such a piece of crap? Nobody wants to buy it. Are you going to be the only reason it's successful? If you build your business to exit, right? Which is what we teach about it, build it so that a private equity firm would want to come in and buy it. It's not that difficult, by the way, right? Not that difficult. There is $150 trillion in the United States sitting in bank accounts waiting to buy successful businesses. That if I gave you $1 trillion, Shelby, it would take you 100 years spending $30 million a day for you to spend it. So somebody's looking for your business. If you build it correctly, and it's not that difficult, but you have to get your end game in mind, know what that number is, and then reverse engineer to where you are with your resources, your talent, your ability, the vertical that you chose to be operating in, and then build your business to that number. Forget all the other stuff. You follow me on social media. I don't have a shitload of people. I mean, I have some, right? But I don't care. The people that follow me are real business owners that I've really helped. And so I don't need 8 million freaking people to follow me. That's my nightmare, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Right.
Ooh.
So those are the things that I would say. Start with the end in mind, right? It's build your end game, know what that number is, and have every extra dollar that you have go into that account.
I'm taking notes over here. Okay,
Good.
Jason, I just want to let you know I'm thinking about my industry. Yeah. I mean, you just opened up something that I'm so happy you did around the follower world and this facade of influence. And that's this thing full circle that, I mean, I was just doing a big sales pitch Friday, and, you know, prospective client, their whole thing was, you know, how do we go viral? How do we go viral? And they're an upper echelon service provider in a particular niche. And so I was like, the number of people that are going to be buying your product that is in the multiple millions, that is not going to be, 3 million people on TikTok. That is not the right performance indicator to know if you're successful. The success is going to look like people get to see you and they call you and say, I want to do the service together. But if you were to distill bursting the bubble of what is an influencer in 2024 and 2025, how would you distill what real influence is?
So social media is for one of two things. There's only two of them. Okay. Vanity or profit. Okay. And there's no other, there's not connection and, friendship and, okay, great. Like that's the social part of it. The social media as a business owner, the way that you use it is either for vanity or for profit. So if I have, for instance, I know my follower count across all of my platforms and et cetera, but more importantly, I know their demographics, right? I know their age. I know they own a business. I know roughly how much they're making in that business. I know a lot of stuff because that's my audience. That's my family. And I remember that before we started the consulting side and the built to exit brand, I fell in love with their outcome. And I know what their outcome is. It's more money now, it's less stress, and it's a secure future. I know that. So that's all I speak to. They don't give a shit what I drive. They don't care because what they care about is what they drive. Right? That's what they care about. They care about what they drive. They don't care about what I drive. They want to know that I've been successful in that I've sold my own businesses, right? They want to, go to LinkedIn and look at my recommendations and see real business owners who have exited their businesses or having wild success. They've got more money now, they're less stressed, and they've got a secure future. Right? Those are the things that they care about. Well, it doesn't take what I drive or where I live or what kind of jet I have or what it doesn't take that. It takes the going to LinkedIn, which I think is the most overlooked, greatest tool that is used by people who sign the front of the check. Every other social media is people that sign the back of the check. Okay. And so when you go to LinkedIn, and LinkedIn's kind of like Facebook in some areas, but you can go to recommendations and look on recommendations that can't be faked, right? You can look at that. Like, you go and you see Dan Fulkerson, for instance, on mine, and you click through and you can send him a message. Hey, did Jason really help you? Yeah. When I started, had two of us. Now we've got 3 law firms in 3 different states. And, I've done this business and that business. And blah, 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 like real people. So what are you using social media for? Okay. And an influencer, to me, look, I'm a little bit old school, right? This is gray for a reason. I'm not a millennial. I am the greatest generation from the greatest generation, which is Generation X. I'm a Gen Xer. And so I know that there's money to be made, but I know that the people that are making the money have the money in mind before they start. Right? Even if you're going to be an advertiser, because that's really all an influencer is just now, instead of going to ABC, you're going, or CBS or NBC or whatever, you're now going to Instagram. And so there's my commercial. I'm just a commercial. Now, if I'm a commercial for Coca-Cola, then I need to have a hell of a lot of eyeballs for me to earn that check. There's a reason, there's an outcome, there's profit in mind. Okay. Most people are like, I have 100 million viewers. There's one, the greatest account on Instagram is the guy that goes through and looks at all these people who buy fake followers and just goes, you're not an influencer. You bought fake followers, right? So profit or vanity, which one are you building for? Social media is a great way to break down geographic barriers between you and your audience that exists all over the world. We have people in Japan and people in China. We have people that utilize my business services. I've had heads of governments reach out and say, hey, we want you to come in and educate our entire country on how to build businesses, right? And how to build a business community. But I don't have 8 million followers, right? If that was the only follower, that head of state from that country, that's my target. And that's for them to come in, for them to use my team that knows how to go out and fix these kind of things, use my brain, my product for their betterment so that they can make more money. That's what we do. We're there for those 3 reasons. So in your business,
so powerful.
Yeah. So in your business, you're looking for people, again, we haven't spoke about this and maybe we should, but in my opinion, people that are looking to get married, right? They're about to get married or they're about to have the video that you did with my wife, that, those kind of things. Like, that was amazing, by the way. It's right here in my desk. So
I love it.
it's always within arm's reach. But my point is that you fall in love. I felt like you fell in love with our outcome. I felt that. Okay. So rule number one, you did. You fell in love with Emily and I's outcome amongst a sea of other people. We felt, and I know we're not, I know you have many other clients, but we felt like you're only one. So one major rule in business you succeeded at. There's 33 million businesses in this country. I know 27 million of them have one employee or less, right? I know the 650,000 of them have over 20 employees. I know the dollar amounts. I know my industry, because again, let's say that you're getting about to get into a relationship, and you go in with your preconceived notions with this lucky young man, right? That steps into your life, and you treat him the way that you treated your last four or whatever, right? The idea is you get to know them. I know how to make Emily feel loved because I asked her, and I took notes, and I said, how do you feel love, right? How do you feel disrespected? I fell in love with her outcome so that I can be the man that's delivering that to her last breath. And it's the same thing in our industry. So people are hiring you, you're falling in love with their outcome, which is to make them more money. Okay. That's really, look, business is not that complex. Business is helping save people money, helping make people money, or measurably improving the quality of their life. That is it. Your machine, whatever it is, whatever content marketing, these shaker bottles, this marker, whatever it is solving a problem. And whoever it's solving a problem for, I need to know as well as I know the back of my hand. What are they looking for? They can't express it to you because most business owners don't know why they're doing social media marketing. They don't know why they're doing content marketing. They don't know why they're taking pictures. They don't know why they're doing videos. They don't know why. Right? They're like, well, it's going to go out there and it's going to get me a bunch of followers. I don't give a crap how many followers you have. What you're looking for is to generate a high quality conversation, right? And my content is going to deliver to you 100 or more high quality conversations. Now their machine on the back end has to be able to have those conversations, not you. You're just bringing them in, right?
Yeah.
You've got scouts, people that are out there going, hey, the buffalo are over here. You've got hunters that go out and kill the buffalo. And then you have farmers that take the buffalo and make everything in the nose and the bat, and they're planting shit, right? You got to know your role. And so in your industry, content development, what is the total market? I got to know that. Okay. I got to know. And then in that space, are there niches? In those niches, what does the competition look like? Okay. If this niche is pretty much 90% of it is gone for one brand, I don't want to compete right there. I want to go over here. Maybe there's a niche for, selling Band-Aids. Well, I'm going to write the best content for people that want Band-Aids. And you, Mr. Band-Aid person who got 10 people to talk to last month, I'm going to deliver 50. And out of those 50, you're going to close 25, which means you're going to make 100,000. Look, I'm going into coaching right now, but my point is,
I love it.
For everybody is to know whose outcome you're falling in love with. And you got to know the numbers, right? Just like my wife, like I got to know what makes her feel loved. I got to know what makes her smile. I got to know what makes her cry. I got to know what makes her, what she loves to eat, where she likes to travel to, where she like, that's my job. And in the business community, I was them. I know the pain. I even know the pain that they're going to get if they do shit the wrong way. Because bankruptcy ain't no joke, right? Bankruptcy took 6 years for me to recover from, right? It caused a divorce. It caused me being separated from my kids. Obviously, ultimately I built it into something that now people from Harvard and Yale and Wharton School of Business hire us to fix their problems. But I get to help them avoid the 6 years of hell that I went through. I'm in love with the small and mid-sized companies' outcomes, which is more money now, less stress, and a secure future.
Amazing. I mean, I'm like, this is like its own masterclass in and of itself. So Jason, I want to land this luxury jet.
Let's do it.
How do people get in touch with you? How do people work with you? Where can they find you?
So the rebrand is almost done for us on the Built to Exit side. It's built, BUILTTOEXIT.biz, built to exit.biz. It's a beautiful website. I've seen it. It's just not live right now. Right now, what you can do is go there, put your email address in. And every week when you do that, you get the show that I do. I video it, and it's just audio on Twitter, but they get the video, they get the show notes, all the prep that I put into it. A lot of valuable information from that. JasonSisneros.com, you can see my name above my head, is for literally everything else. So those are the two places that you can get a hold of me. And then obviously Twitter, it's at the J Sisneros on Twitter, and Jason Sisneros on LinkedIn, and Jason Sisneros on all the other stuff.
Jason, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you for spending this last hour and a half with me, and thank you for sharing such practical, full spectrum wisdom.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for what you're doing. You know, as you know, my wife and I really adore you. We really, really adore you, and we wish you nothing but success. We know whatever you put your hands to is going to be wildly successful, and I think that these shows that you do should be shared, and they should be, listened to, and we just wish nothing but the best for you, because you're an amazing human being.
Thank
you for coming into our life. Our video, we watch it all the time. We love it. Like, it's amazing.
It's so fun. Oh my gosh. Y'all made my life just a cakewalk. That was so much fun.
Holy cow. You made it to the end. Nice work. If you love this, let us know. The biggest way you can pay it forward is taking the next 45 seconds and writing our show a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Your feedback is the lifeblood of our show. And if you're sick and tired of hiring the one-off photo video production company, the next best social media manager, or frivolously throwing money at marketing just chasing more likes, then it's time for us to have a conversation. We specialize in strategic content campaigns that generate more qualified leads to make your small or mid-sized business more money. Get a full-fledged media department for a fraction of the cost of an in-house creative director. Email heyruby@rubyriotcreatives.com to get started. Until next time, live a life with stories worth telling.